I'm working on a portrait painting. The sitter is my long-time friend Beverley Pinder, who immigrated to Australia 30 years ago from Ceylon.
I don't really look Ceylonese, and that's all born out of the fact that I have a very mixed background. So I was in Ceylon for the first 13 years of my life, born of parents who were born in Ceylon. Their parents are born in Ceylon.
The Prime Minister was a Sinhalese. They won the election, and she wanted to change the language and make it Sinhalese, so that if the children passed the exams, they couldn't pass without passing the Sinhalese language. And then, of course, my husband decided to leave.
In 1978, Beverley won the Miss Australia pageant. 10 years earlier, the White Australia policy required her family to prove their white ancestry to gain entry into Australia.
So I had friends who were Malays, friends who were Sinhalese, friends who were Tamils, and other burghers as well. We called ourselves Dutch burghers, and that was our race. It was a minority race of about 2%. There was this thing, I call it a thing because it was just a thing. We didn't know what it was, but there was this constant desire to go to Australia.
It's so smooth. That's right. And you were so struggling. No, you weren't struggling. I was.
We had such a wonderful togetherness. You know, we celebrated Christmas, we celebrated Ramazan, the Muslim celebrations, we celebrated the Buddhist celebrations. We enjoyed each other's culture.
I had two brothers older than I and two younger. And the focus was always on the boys being able to do better. So Australia, being the land of milk and honey, was the chosen place as opposed to Canada.
I didn't know anything about the White Australia policy.
My parents talking about us having to trace our genealogy, and I was quite surprised because coming from a country like Ceylon, we didn't have White Australia policy there.
My kids, of course, they think they're Australian. In fact, my son, when he was young, he didn't know he was black. He thought he was white. Because he was watching a movie on Sri Lanka one day and he said, "Gee, all the people are dark there, aren't they?" And I looked at him and said, "And so are you?" And he said, "No." And I said, "Yes, you are." He did not realize that.
Like Beverley, I am also an immigrant. I arrived from Israel in 1970 at the age of 15. My parents were originally from Romania.
And from where I stood, it was to prove you had white blood in you. And we actually lodged our papers and got results within quick time, because both parents have a genealogy that shows that Dutch intermarried Dutch, and there's no Sinhalese in that makeup.
And of course, to get past, my husband had to go to the graves and get all the genealogy of our grandparents, great-grandparents. We had to get 90% English blood to get past. So all that had to be done before we have to get the final report, you know.
Initially, we wanted to go to England, but my grandfather told me life in Australia would be better.
When we arrived on the 2nd of October 1968, the thing that hit us most was the space. And I remember when I came to Melbourne, it actually was Essendon Airport at the time, I got off the plane and it was a freezing cold day. It was 43 degrees Fahrenheit. And I looked up and I said, "Wow, I'm going to make it here." We then found an Edwardian 3-level flat, but it was like really a house in Dalgety Street. It was in St Kilda, so St Kilda is very, very dear to my heart. I really was October, I wanted to go to school.
I met Beverley in Melbourne at Elwood High School, where we became very close friends.
Elwood was as diverse in its its people and culture as Ceylon was. I was introduced to Jewish people, Yugoslav. I met my best friend Rachel, who was Israeli. As the years went on, there was this bond was being created that was more than just a friendship. There were roots that were almost starting to merge as well. And I think that's probably the basis of our relationship when we reconnected 37 years later.
I've got some great ideas for the painting. So
Brilliant. Let's have a look.
Tell me what you think, okay?
Let's put my bag down.
Process of elimination, and now the idea is definitely not this because it's just too obvious. But we've got, the idea is to use this side here on the right hand side in the painting using the hieroglyphics, your address, name and a country in Sinhalese.
Fabulous.
And
that's I'll write it down for you. So that's Beverley. And then that is the air sound, so that's ge.
Certainly I remember, as all the boys do remember, she had fantastic legs. She had a lovely mini skirt, as most of the girls did in those days. So we all remember her mini skirt and her legs.
In that when my family were political refugees in Hungary in the late 1950s and they sought political asylum, first of all the Austrian government took them in when they walked across the border, and then secondly the Australian government also supported them and us and assisted us to come to Australia where they were able to start new lives.
Both my parents are Holocaust survivors, and both survived the war in different ways. My father was in a concentration camp, my mother was hidden in a convent. After the war they managed to get on an illegal boat and went to Palestine.
when Beverley and her family moved to Springvale, we lost contact with each other for many years.
The first time in my years had faced racism at Springvale High, and that really did, it unseated me, and I found that I really didn't know how to handle it. And the only way, my response was to go out and enter myself in the Miss Springvale beauty competition. And when I won it, that to me was almost like a message to myself: be strong, go out there, you can now, go with pride and say, look, I have been acknowledged as an Australian and as Miss Springvale.
And from there she went to Miss Mercedes-Benz and Miss Glen Waverley and Victorian Beach Girl and finally Miss Australia.
The best of luck to all of you. This is award number 4, the Australian Beauty Queen, Beverley Pinder.
And we were so proud of her when she became Miss Australia. I just remember the news going through the school like wildfire. And when I heard later on how she had struggled with this White Australia policy, which I didn't know then, I thought how ironic, because here she is trying to prove that she's got this little bit of white in her, and here they've chosen her as Miss Australia. What an achievement.
I was so proud that one of our school friends was Miss Australia and went on to take part in the Miss World pageant. I was really proud, yes.
That took me on a trip to Mexico in July for the Miss Universe competition. My roommate was a 17-year-old, I was now 23 years of age, was a 17-year-old girl from South Africa. And there were major concerns that we wouldn't get on, of course, based on the fact that I was coloured and she was white. And can I tell you, out of the 81 girls in this competition, we were the only combination that didn't have to change their partners. And one of the main reasons for that was that I actually saw Margaret Gardner as a potential Miss Universe. And I started coaching her and helping her to be on time, get her clothes together. And unbeknown to me, what was happening there was that I was developing or showing tendencies towards a skill that's very much of a public relations nature.
Beverley started a new career in public relations.
And worked for Alan and Harry Smith for a good 7 years. Had asked them for a partnership. For about 3 years I kept asking and wanting to also put money in, but it wasn't forthcoming. So I resigned within days of that and didn't have anything to go to, nothing at all. But I had a very loving husband who said, well, I'll go out and hire an office for you, a serviced office. I sat there on 5 June 1985 with a telephone line, and by the following week I had 3 clients.
Beverley's always displayed passion for what she was undertaking, so it wasn't just a project, it was totally passionate, and she would be consumed by it at that time. And I think the one that comes to mind is we were strongly pursuing the energy efficiency story for appliances here in Australia. She became a vital partner in the organisation over a number of years to communicate that out.
In August 2004, Beverley's portrait was accepted into a prestigious art exhibition at Crown Towers in Melbourne. The portrait painting acknowledges Beverley's capacity to overcome barriers, which is an inspiration to us all. The dividing structural line in the painting creates a kind of a barrier. Does it keep things out, or does it keep things in? As Beverley gazes at us with a Mona Lisa smile, she's looking at us, or are we looking at her? This dual hard-edge divide brings a sense of spatial perspective and the visual similitude of Margaret history, experience and friendship in our land of milk and honey.